All right, so we're diving deep today into the ICC Champions Trophy final.
Okay.
India versus New Zealand.
Right.
But we're looking at it through kind of an interesting lens. We've got some fascinating comments from New Zealand's captain, Mitchell Santner.
Right.
And he's talking about how this whole thing is playing out with India having home turf advantage, even though it's not technically their home turf.
Mm-hmm.
And New Zealand kind of bouncing around.
Okay. Interesting.
So let's unpack this whole idea of home away from home and how that might actually play out in the final match.
Yeah. It's fascinating because in cricket, we always talk about home advantage, but what does that actually mean?
Right.
And what Santner's comments really get at is the fact that it's not just about being familiar with the surroundings, the crowd, the atmosphere.
Sure.
It's about really knowing the pitch, like having an intimate understanding of how the ball is going to behave on that surface. And he actually gives some specific examples of how India has been really exploiting the Dubai pitches, which tend to be a bit slower. They've got their wrist spinners like Chahal and Kuldeep.
Yeah.
And those guys are just deadly on these kinds of surfaces.
Right. And they're using that to their advantage to really deceive the Kiwi batsmen.
Exactly. And that's the key point here. They're not just playing on these pitches. They're using their knowledge of these pitches to inform their strategies. They're picking teams and tactics specifically to exploit the conditions.
Okay, so India's really dialed into this Dubai pitch.
Seems that way, yeah.
Now, on the flip side, New Zealand's been splitting their time between Pakistan and Dubai.
Right.
Do you think this inconsistency is a real hurdle for them, or are they good enough to just adapt on the fly?
I mean, adaptability is definitely key in cricket.
Yeah.
But I do think that having that really deep understanding of a pitch's nuances can be absolutely invaluable.
Sure.
I mean, it's almost like having a cheat sheet for how the ball is going to behave.
Right.
Where the best spots to bowl are, even how that pitch is going to deteriorate throughout the match. And, from Santner's comments, it sounds like New Zealand might not have that same level of ingrained knowledge.
I see. Okay, so now another point that Santner brought up was comparing those Dubai pitches to the ones in Lahore.
Right.
And he specifically noted the slower pace in Dubai. So in your view, how could this difference between the pitches impact the final match?
Well, the slower pace in Dubai, as we were kind of saying before, could really favor certain playing styles.
Okay.
Because we were talking about India's wrist spinners.
Right.
And how they could really have a field day on these slower pitches. But then you look at New Zealand, they've got some real power hitters like Neesham and Phillips.
Right.
And these guys might have to adjust their approach instead of relying on just brute force.
Yeah.
They might need to really focus on placement and timing to be successful.
I see. So it really changes the way they need to play the game.
Absolutely. And we might see them playing more of those lofted shots down the ground rather than trying to go for those big cross-batted slogs that you might see on a faster pitch.
Wow. It's really amazing how those subtle differences in the pitch can totally change the way the game's played.
Oh, it's massive. And it's not just about the pitch itself. It's about how each team understands and adapts to those conditions.
Yeah.
And on that note, this tournament hasn't exactly been predictable.
Right.
Santner even mentioned the kind of mixed results we've seen.
Right.
Underdogs, upsetting favorites, and no real clear pattern emerging.
Yeah, you really don't know which version of each team is going to show up for the final.
Right.
It adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It does. And then you layer on top of that the pressure cooker environment of a championship match.
Right.
It's intense. And Santner was really emphasizing the mental aspect of it.
Yeah, he was saying that a final is just different.
It is different
Any other game.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about skill at that point.
Yeah.
It's about staying composed under immense pressure and making smart decisions when the stakes are highest.
And for India, do you think this home turf advantage helps or hurts them in that regard?
It's a double-edged sword,
Okay.
On the one hand, you'd think they'd be more confident playing on familiar territory.
Sure.
But on the other hand, the weight of expectation from the home crowd,
Yeah.
that could be a lot to carry.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Because these two teams, they've already met in the group stage.
They have.
Right here in Dubai.
Right.
So what can we learn from that match that might give us a little preview of what we might see in the final?
Well, one thing that really stood out from that match was the dominance of India's spinners.
Right.
New Zealand's batsmen really struggled to read their variations, and it ended up costing them the match. So it'll be interesting to see if they've made any adjustments, tactically or mentally, to counter that threat in the final.
So to wrap this up, we've got India's strategic advantage in Dubai.
Right.
The unique challenges presented by this slower pitch. And, of course, the psychological roller coaster of a championship final.
It's all there.
So, given everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
does New Zealand actually have a realistic chance of upsetting India on their adopted home ground?
It's a tough one, you know. I think it's definitely an uphill battle for New Zealand. But in cricket, anything is possible.
Right.
They're going to need to adapt quickly to these conditions,
Yeah.
find a way to neutralize India's spin attack, and most importantly, hold their nerve under pressure.
Right.
If they can do all of that, they just might pull off an upset.
Okay. So there you have it, folks. Something to think about as you watch the final. This is going to be a good one.
Can't wait.
I can't wait either. All right. Thanks for breaking it down.
You got it.
See you next time.
Sounds good.